Okay, yeah. All right. Welcome. As Jilly likes to say, it's the Stone Fruit Roll-Up. I'm on like week 25. Like I feel like I've been doing this. I feel like I've been doing this my whole life, you guys. Welcome to Stone Fruit Roll-Up, our weekly Thursday show. That Stone Fruit Roll-Up. Wow. I've been doing this weekly Thursday show. Where I do this thing where I set myself up for success by clicking on some YouTube experiences so we don't look like we have no audience, and then it starts to play in my headphones. And so this is the beauty of live because it gets very confusing. However, all that is done. Let's put that aside and say again, Rebecca talking, take two. This is the Stone Fruit Roll-Up, your weekly live show here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. You're watching the show about building the show that you're watching right now. It's a wildly experimental place for us from a marketing, branding, personal development space, and we get to have lots of fun and quality conversations here. And so today is like the cherry, and that is a stone fruit, cherry on the stone fruit Sunday, because I get to enjoy an incredible conversation with one of my favorite people in the entire world, and that is on a personal level. I have been intrinsically involved with our guest this week, Nicole Bruno, for at least 6 or 7 years as our kids went to the same free range hippie school. And we've been friends ever since. And it's been extremely exciting for me to watch Nicole, kind of come out of the lotus flower, if you will, through her own professional and personal journey, and watch her ideate and create this incredible new career path for herself based on all of her skills that she has brought to the table with her own business and marketing, professional marketing jobs, etc., and a natural passion for branding and what the world needs right now. So all of those things have come together over the past few months, and she has an exciting new brand called Ruffled Feathers. And Ruffled Feathers is a coaching concern, if you will, in the personal development space. But Nicole does it differently than any other coach I've ever met. And I come across a lot of coaches in this biz. And Nicole comes at it from a very cool and interesting way that has personally helped me in my own life overcome some deeply, personal and painful moments. She's been there as a partner in the work to help me deconstruct some toxic ideology and get out of my own way and be the live streaming experience you see before you. So, without further ado, please allow me to welcome Nicole Bruno from backstage and to cue the audience and say, welcome, my darling. Thank you so much for coming on this delightful little weekly show with me and telling me all about your new brand so we can share it with the universe, shall we say.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh my God. I couldn't have done my life as it is right now without you, Nicole. This completely honestly.
I appreciate that. Well, I feel the same way. And that's why we've been able to work together, besides just in personal life, I think.
Well, I can imagine both of us are personalities to be reckoned with. So luckily we found our vibe very easily in the game. When I first met you, you did have your own business, so your entrepreneurial spirit has been with us. It's been with us all along. And you've gone through some life transitions. You've gone to work for other folks. You've done community impact work. You've gotten super involved with your church. You have a beautiful artisanal brand that makes, what would you say, call that, horticulturally inspired, botanically inspired jewelry and other things. Tell us a little bit about that aspect of your creative endeavors and entrepreneurial adventures.
Yeah, that the art piece really started as a COVID time. there was time. So I started to work on some stuff that I'd always wanted to try during COVID, and it really turned into an opportunity to literally stop and smell the roses, so to speak, because I look for individual flowers and leaves and gems and rocks and shells, and I collect them, and I dry them, and I make jewelry and mantle pieces and some other kitschy and beautiful, depending on what I'm working on, pieces. But that's a big part of, I think, my who I am as a person and personality, and that is also something that comes forth in this brand, because there's something about that art that is very zen and creative and comfortable, and I'm happy that I carve out time to do that, and it helps me be more grounded and be able to be present in other places in my life. And I'm also able to be expressive in that space a little bit differently than I might be with words or marketing or branding, as that often takes up a lot of creative energy, as you know.
I do indeed. For folks who haven't had a chance to see your work, you literally forage within the natural space and find interesting, I think, just botanicals like flowers and seed. Walk us through like how what you're looking for and what you transform them into, and how that is a creative play space for you.
Yeah, I really look for beauty, and so or uniqueness, which is often the same. And it's I look for color, I look for depth, I look for what will dry well. Like some of it is just an actual skill set of like looking at a flower or a leaf or whatever it is, and knowing whether or not it'll keep its color and if it'll dry the right way and what size it's going to be, and like apply it forward to how it might look in a piece. So it might be a necklace, it might be earrings. If I'm doing earrings, then I have to find two flowers that are obviously different. None are the same, but they have to be close enough in size and in color to match. So it really is a exploratory opportunity to go into the world and be seeking out that beauty and that time, creating that time to be able to find those things. And I really, really love it. I wish I had brought some. I actually do have. I didn't make this bead, but
I didn't set you up for success by saying I was going to talk about it. So to ask you to show something seemed a little rude. But if you do have something you can
right
just
here.
grab, yeah, tell us what we're looking at.
I didn't actually make this bead. I purchased it, but this is a hydrangea flower, and so I added that on. And I do much more intricate work than this, but this was just a simple one that sometimes people prefer, simple pieces, and then I tend to like a little bit more extravagant stuff. So I make a range of what those look like. So this happens to just be a choker I had nearby, but I don't, between the cats and the cords, I can't really get to my other stuff very easily.
Well, I didn't say you up for success. I didn't tell you that I'd be talking about it, but that's naturally just where the conversation led to me, because I really want to know what's the most unusual piece of nature you've resined into a keepsake.
I'm actually working on, excuse me, I'm working on a piece right now for a mutual friend of ours, actually, that involves a turtle skull and a porcupine quill. So that's, some of it gets a little weird, and that's the fun of it. I'm also doing a keepsake project for somebody who had flowers. They had a lei for their daughter's graduation. Their daughter had a lei, and they saved it, and they gave that to me to dry so I could turn it into a keepsake. So I'm doing earrings and a Christmas ornament with the flowers that they had given me as well.
Oh my God, I collect Christmas ornaments. That sounds delicious. In fact, you gave me a Christmas ornament the very first year that we were friends. And it says something like Soul Sisters or Best Friends, something with a date with 2016 on it. I hung it on our tree just this year. So excellent segue though into like unusual things in nature found to create these beautiful keepsakes. I think it's kind of an allegory for the way that you collect and treasure people, and the way you see, kind of like the staying and natural beauty inside someone, and also their potential to bloom and flower. So let's talk about how that works in your coaching practice. Tell me about your journey from being, a small business owner when I first met you, to a few marketing forays, and now what inspired you to hang out your shingle and create Ruffled Feathers? I'd love to hear more about your journey.
Yeah, so years ago now, which feels strange, I had a business partner, and she and I were birth doulas, and we built Doulas of Capitol Hill, which is still a very well-known agency for doulas in Washington, D.C. And I did that work for many, many years, and I loved it. I was both in the birth room and behind the scenes doing the marketing and copywriting and branding of all of that. And then life shifted. I, at the time, it was unfortunate, was going through a divorce. My life is in a great place now. I don't regret any of that, but it didn't make it less hard. And I had to go back to sort of a traditional 9 to 5. So I worked at a commercial real estate company for a little bit of time. And then I worked for Community of Hope in DC, which was also awesome. I loved it. I just didn't know if I could do that full time and also start pursuing what I really wanted to do, which was going from actual literal life coaching, if you will, being a birth doula, to coaching with families and people that are moving into different stages of life. And I felt like I moved into a different stage of life. I stayed in this baby stage, new parent stage for a long period of time. And as my daughter has grown and I have grown, I think the work for myself needed to grow into a different space as well. So that's how I landed at wanting to be a life coach. I actually always wanted to be a life coach. I was in college and wanting to be a life coach, but I was also of the mindset of like, well, what could I really teach people as a young person on the planet? I disagree with that opinion now, but I also feel like I have enough wisdom and age to do this from an authentic place. So I'm glad. I'm very happy to be 38 and being in this stage of life right now.
I'm happy you're in this stage of life right now too, because I get to witness it all come to life. How did you come to the realization that you did actually have something to teach people, and what were those things, and how did they become the pillars for what we know as Ruffled Feathers today?
I went through a very difficult separation and divorce, and it took a lot of growth and learning for myself. It was a lot of identifying how I contributed to the downfall of our marriage. I was not solely responsible, but I also was not responsible towards that. So I needed to look at myself and my own growth and figure that out. And a lot of what I realized is that I marched to the beat of a different drum to some extent, and that there used to be a lot of shame associated with that, or not fitting in, or not knowing how to make friends, or know how to be in the world. And I needed to figure out how I wanted to be in the world, and what that really came down to was being in integrity with my values, knowing what my values were, holding on to them tight and strong as a pathway forward to be able to discover what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, how I wanted to be in the world, including as a parent, as a partner, and making sure that I was coming from a place of authenticity, because if I can be authentic and I can come at a place of vulnerability, then other people feel that and they know that and they can gather that sense of energy, and then they feel like they can be safe as well too. And sometimes we need to heal from some really bad or really weird things, and I think everybody deserves a space to do that.
What are some of those values you alluded to just a moment ago?
Well, I mentioned already, like authenticity, vulnerability, autonomy is very important to me. I also am a big believer, though, that autonomy ends when it meets community, and there's a line there somewhere that we need to strike in order to better our community. It doesn't mean we have to make ourselves small, but it does mean that we have to find where that balance is. I do a lot of anti-oppression work. I go to the Unitarian Church of Annapolis. I'm on their board, and I do a lot of anti-racism, anti-oppression work there, because if everyone is not free, then there's no point in our freedom. I cannot benefit or enjoy my freedom or liberation if I know other people are suffering. So I do feel like it's my job, as now professionally, but also my job just as a human, to make sure that people are uplifted and heard, and able to live their lives as freely and peacefully as they'd like to.
I would say that that right there is what you were the most helpful to me in my own journey, as I shared, like, oh my God, Nicole's helped me like so much over time. And that is really not around the micro as much as the macro. I had really no idea how much work I needed to do to decolonize myself from like the patriarchy and to decolonize myself from capitalism, from, insert your ism here, that I just had not had a full breadth of understanding how I was an agent within inside those systems, and how the things that were happening to me in my own marriage journey, my own separation journey, were things that were happening to women everywhere, that I was really part of a larger movement for women today than just kind of one person isolated in a silo. And so thanks for that. Number one. And number two, like, how did you came by that supernaturally, but maybe you could share what it's like to help someone kind of recognize that they're maybe more of a cog in the wheel than they realized, or more, they were following patterns that were laid out for generations before. Um, share how you make this insight available to the people you care about.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really important, that was definitely an eye opener for me, and I think this came through a lens of anti-racism work in the beginning, reading White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and lots of other books. But one aspect of this that really highlights it well, I think, is that, if you think about the analogy of a fish being in water, it can't see the water. It just sees what's in front of it. But if something splashes the water, then you can't unsee it. You see it everywhere, and you're not a cog in the system. You're not choosing to be in the system. The system exists. We're born into the system. And it doesn't mean we need to accept the system as is. It also doesn't mean that we need to fight the system or necessarily be working to the bone to resist the system. It means we need to be able to find ways to work within a system that is inherently broken, for anybody that is not stereotypically in power. So, generally speaking, white men, wealthy people, we all have our own amount of privilege as white women, all of that, and figure out how we can balance bringing our privilege and skills to helping other people in the system find rest and find liberation and joy, because why else are we here? I think hedonism is viewed as a bad word. I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think it trumps the community aspect that we talk about, that I mentioned earlier when we're talking about autonomy, but we're allowed to have pleasure and joy. And I want to help people find pleasure and joy in a system that really pushes us to keep making and buying more things, or keep falling into line in systems that keep us small, and oppressed, and making other people's lives better before we make our own lives better.
I think that this really speaks to the core of your coaching practice or brand, and that is around deconstructionism. Can you talk a little bit about that? What does that mean to you, and how are you using it?
Yeah. So I picked Ruffled Feathers, and I will say that Rebecca really helped me narrow in my values, what I wanted to be doing in this line of work. I knew I had an idea, but it was a kind of a big scope. And it's still kind of a big scope, I think. But I brainstormed with her, and I landed on Ruffled Feathers, and our tagline, "We're up to no good, but no is KNOW," because it's really important that to do any sort of deconstructing or decolonizing or anti-racism work, that there has to be joy and there has to be rest, or there's going to be burnout, because the work is too hard and it's been going on too long for any individual or group of people to not have those things that help raise up the reason that we're doing it, and the dreamscape that could happen in the future regarding those things. So it's not that I need to, as a life coach, come in and suggest to you that you need to change your whole life. You may not need to change your whole life, but if you're looking for support or coaching, it's usually because you don't have your finger on something that doesn't feel right. You're looking for a change, you're looking to align values, you're looking for permission to do something that maybe you're scared to do. And by permission, I mean, I don't need to grant you permission. You need to grant you permission. And I think we create space for that to happen, because I really don't believe that we have to fall in line into these systems. If you want to quit your job and do something different, like, let's figure out how to do that. If you want to get divorced, let's figure out how to do that. If you want to bring in another person into a marriage ethically with non-monogamy, you can do that. How do neurospicy people function? My whole household has ADHD. I do, my husband does, my daughter does. This house gets very chaotic, and we don't fall in line to the systems that just work. Like, where my mom might say, just make a list. Like, okay, mom, I'm 38. I think if that had solved my problems by now, I would have just made the lists, right? Like, we're not looking to make our lives more difficult. So how do we figure out what actually works for ourselves, for us, for our families, for our children? How do we build relationships and communicate in a way that is authentic and caring about the people around us? And being able to come to a space where every day you wake up and you may not know what the day is going to hold, but you're not nervous about the day, or you're not anxious, or you're not concerned about how the day is going to unfold, because you trust that you created a space where that day is going to unfold in a way that is authentic to you. And that makes lots of things less scary.
You said something earlier that I'd love to touch back on or go a little deeper, and that is about it's not about fighting the system per se. It's about learning how to navigate within it peaceably. And I think that when folks see a disruptive brand that's about, deconstruction, decolonization, living a life of freedom, of autonomy, of sovereignty, and your anti-racism work and the work that you're doing, you see it feels like this big kind of like angsty movement that's in fight mode against the status quo. It doesn't, but what you're saying is that's not my approach here. I want people to find, I don't know, relationship with it. Talk more about your approach there.
Yeah, there are some amazing resources out there that really speak to this. Trisha Hersey wrote "Rest is Resistance." You have Pleasure Activism. My Body's Not an Apology. There are people of color, Black women, who are writing these books about how, like, yes, we need to be fighting for justice and fighting for freedom and existence for everyone. And that is a very overwhelming process, but part of that resistance is rest and is joy, because we're not in a system that makes us think that those things are easily accessible to us. So a big part of how I like to approach things is, it's not that you can't get mad or angry. I think that there's plenty of space for that to exist and to be used as a tool and mechanism to be able to move the work forward. However, we exist within a capitalistic system. The system itself is not necessarily inherently bad. It is manipulated and abused, just like lots of things are. And so it is really important to find what works for you within it and what doesn't, and how you can adjust to those things. Because I kind of believe that none of it will change drastically unless we burn it all down, so to speak. But we're not going to do that. Like, we're not going to, as individual people or even as groups, voting blocks, etc. That takes so much momentum and time. And in the meantime, we have to live our lives and we have to exist in this space. And it's just really important that we remember where we can fit and do our best work. And that usually means it's when we have time to rest and to dream. Trisha Hersey talks about how they're, like, part of the momentum of an excitement of not knowing the future is it hasn't been imagined yet. Like, if we have space to dream and we have space to hope, we haven't failed at a future because it hasn't happened. So that gives us a very creative and blank canvas to imagine what it could look like. And then that makes it a lot more exciting. It's like making a dream board. You don't have to necessarily follow the rules about how we've gotten this far. We could do it very differently. And that brings a little bit more joy. So yeah, exactly. A little bit more joy to the idea, a little bit more hope for raising kids, walking into the world right now. I mean, we both have, my daughter's almost a teenager. You have a teenager. Like, my hope is in them. And I just want to help other people find joy and happiness as we walk towards this, what feels like the apocalypse a lot of the time.
It does feel like the apocalypse. Sometimes I wonder, like, every generation's been like, oh my God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling.
Right.
And so, at the ripe old age of 52, almost 53, I'm like, okay, well, you're at the age where everything does feel like it's in colossal collapse, but also everything does feel like it's in colossal collapse. So,
it's like the Billy Joel song, like "We Didn't Start the Fire." Like, a lot of times people feel really overwhelmed by like all of the things that are potentially could like destroy the earth at any given moment. And it's not that isn't overwhelming, but it does actually give me a little pause to remember that is true, that there was stuff happening. It's not that the progress has happened fast enough. It certainly has not, but there is progress. There's ongoing progress. There's new leaders and new energy. And you just have to keep following, the people that are leading us forward, and then letting the people that have done the work rest and give them space to feel joy and enjoy their families and enjoy the life they have. And that's partly why I feel like it's our job and opportunity as younger people to sort of take that. We're, as millennials, like, we're just moving into a space of power, right? Like, I am squarely a millennial, but I'm on the early end. And so, we're not coming into power until you're 40s, 50s, 60s years old. And so we have an opportunity generationally to make a lot of change and to pave the path for Gen Z and Gen A, who I think will literally take over the world in a way that we really we're really hoping to see. And I'm
Saturn,
really
are you listening?
I'm really excited for that.
Rest is a 4-letter word for me.
Mm-hmm. It is for most people.
I have 2 modes, and it's work my ass off until I have no spoons, and then no spoon. And those are really, unless I'm with somebody who's going to energize me, and Saturn can attest to this, it's just like work my ass off and then completely stare into the void.
Yeah.
So rest, I really struggle with the idea of productivity is value. I'm Gen X, so it's even deeper in me than maybe in yourself. But like, I have personal fulfillment, feeling like I've made progress on something, and if I just lay there and read or whatever, I just don't know how to do resting. So how do I do resting? How do I do that? That's not the extreme.
But that's so common. Like, I hear it all the time. People are literally don't even know how to rest. And what I'll say also is that it teaches our kids not to rest. And we're just creating this system where there needs to be perfection and busyness. And where is there space for people to just grow and figure out what they want to do, right? Like, if I kept myself so busy with work during COVID, I might not have discovered, like, creating this whole art studio and this space that I do, or creating this space and energy to be able to do this kind of work. It's necessary that we do it. And we have to give ourselves permission. And I mean that literally. When I go to bed at night, if my mind is racing, I literally will say to myself, give yourself permission to put this down and sleep. It will all be there tomorrow. And like, literally give myself permission to let it go, because there's always going to be more to do. There's always going to be stuff to do tomorrow, unless there is no tomorrow, in which case none of it matters. So there's always going to be time. And sometimes it's a matter of juggling. You can't juggle balls without dropping them. And then you kind of need to figure out what's a glass ball versus what's a bouncy ball. And it's not to dismiss the important of all of this, but we talk about balance in a way that is not actual balance, because balancing suggests that we can do all of the things really well at the same time, and that we are, doing this thing and keeping things sort of all equal. And that's just not true.
That's
Or
the
it's not
impossible job. I think that's
right.
womanhood already. Like, it's an
Mm-hmm.
impossible job.
Right. Like, you need to be working, and you need to be a mom, and you need to get this project done, and you need to be on the PTA. And it's the Barbie quote that's been seen around the world. And all of that is true. And the thing is that we actually don't really have to do much of any of that. We are compelled to do that because that's what we've been taught, and that is what we feel that we have our value invested in. And I will say, for me, while I want to do this work and I want to make money and I want to have a career, like, none of that is negated by the fact that I also believe that my job is to enjoy spending time with my children and not feeling, or my daughter, and not feeling like I have to be rushing to the next thing. It was her saying to me, she goes to gymnastics class, and this is a month ago or so now, and she said, we were watching somebody, we were there before class started, and a girl did some move or whatever, and I said, I want to see you be able to do that by the end of the summer. And she stopped me and she said, please don't put pressure on me to do that. I do this for fun, and I want to just keep having fun doing it. And I was really thankful that she was able to say that to me, because it's kind of a bold statement, but that really stayed with me. Because why? She's not going to be an Olympian. Like, that's just not, but she's exercising and she's having fun, moving her body and enjoying that. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. But we, especially as parents, I think, want to see our kids be successful. And success to us has been going to college and getting a job and taking care of yourself financially. And it's not that those things need to be thrown out the window. That's not true. But I believe that success is that my daughter grows up to be kind and happy, and the rest of that will fall into place.
Aw, Hales, giving us life lessons for the rest of us.
As a teenager does, where she just really was yelling at me, and I was like, okay, I hear you.
As a teenager does, indeed. How I think that you brought up something that's so another, like, just walking contradiction for parenthood is, you're right. Like, what does it matter whether or not you're in tons of extracurricular activities, and we're constantly pushing the experience or that experience, but also we want to instill a growth mindset. And I don't think it's necessarily about and maybe it is. Maybe I haven't decolonized myself from capitalism enough to see what's a growth mindset and what's just like the push for productivity. Because I think there is something inherently rewarding as a human to, like, not know how to do something and then discover how to do it and then do it terribly and then keep getting better at it. Hopefully, this show is a perfect example of that. On day one, I'd never really hadn't gone live at all and was like a deer in the headlights, and now I'm only mildly dysfunctional to get us live and to run a show, and that's been satisfying. So in your opinion, what is the line between a growth mindset, instilling a growth mindset in our kids, and further pushing the tenets of success on our kids, because we need them to be they need to be survivalists, really?
So I kind of have a hot take on this to some extent. First of all, I don't believe people are lazy generally. It's not to say that we don't have lazy days or we don't go through periods of time where we appear lazy, but we're also not talking about trauma. We're not talking about overworking or burnout or rest or mental health issues. So I do believe that when people have the space um, to set their own pace in these kinds of growth mindset, that we inherently will do that. And that what our kids are juggling and figuring out in this world is very different than what we had to figure out in the world. I mean, we were born, my generation, I had my first computer in my house in 6th grade. Like, I was definitely the toe of the line. I got my first Apple phone after college. So they're born into this technology. They're born connected to the world in a different way. And I think it's silly to assume that they need to be raised the same way we were. Now, that being said, there are skills and things that are necessary in order to be able to figure out what one wants to do or grow when they choose that path forward. So you need to be able to read, you need to be able to write and type, you need to be able to do basic math. And then at that point, I would argue that most of the time adults find a niche that they love and that's what they focus in. It's very rare that if somebody is excellent at writing, they decide to become a mathematician, right? So why do we feel the need to have to push all of the things all of the time instead of the ebb and flow, in the similar way that we look at balance, right? Like that's an ebb and a flow. And if you give people space to rest and heal and grow, almost everyone will take it. We're just not taught to do that. And we're taught to just push through all of those other things while simultaneously providing value to capitalism.
Exactly. Exactly. What's your answer, do you think? Is it around, I guess I'm trying to lead us here in the direction of one of my favorite things about the time we live in right now is the absolute deconstruction of generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you're talking about generational trauma through the lens of capitalism, through the ideal of the only way you can be successful is to constantly be growing, changing, aggressively working, etc.
Yeah.
So I just would love to hear, is it about, devaluing the opinion? Is it opinion? Is it a mindset? Is it a worldview? But like devaluing the idea that older knows best. And in that is a bunch of stuff around like, children being treated like they're proto-humans until they're 18 with no agency, voice, or opinion. What's your ideas around kind of breaking the chains, I guess, of like, well, the way we've done it hasn't always been working. You've got to kind of reinvent yourself and give yourself time to rest and break this generational trauma bonds, I guess. I'm not asking this very articulately, Nicole, for sure. I guess I just want to talk about breaking generational trauma.
We can talk about that.
Let's talk about that. I guess that's what I want to talk about.
I think a lot of, you'll hear, I'm sure you've heard, people say things like, well, I did it this way and I turned out fine, or I did it this way and those people they're soft, or kids are spoiled, or whatever. And it's not that maybe isn't true. There's truth in every aspect of generational change. And also it's the view that we don't want the change to happen. I think that happens generationally. But at the same time, my goal is to make sure that my daughter spends less time in therapy as an adult because she feels safe to talk to me about the things that we do wrong. I don't expect to be a perfect parent, but I am creating space to be approachable and to realize that she is a different human than I am. I was a nerd in school. I still am, but like,
I was gonna say, what do you mean was?
Yeah, no, I still am now, but now I embrace it, and I have enough other nerdy friends that it's cool. Like I've gotten to this stage of life. She's not. She's she loves to climb trees. She loves to run and be outside. And why am I comparing that desire for movement and being outside and that kind of personality? She's outgoing and extroverted. Why is that better or worse than anything else? It's not. I just need to put down this, like, well, what is she going to do with her life if she's not doing this thing? Like, she's going to figure it out, because we all do. And very often it's not what we start doing when we're in high school or when we're in those confines. So that's a part of it. And then also just being open to talking about things that are hard without judgment. Like very often I'll create, with Haley, I might say, do you need to vent about this, or are you trying to problem solve? Because I don't need to come in and problem solve all the time. Or sometimes she might be venting about something and I might offer another perspective, because sometimes we need a perspective shift. But that is not to tell her what to do or how to do it. It is to just say, maybe you should consider listening. If you have 3 friends telling you that you're not speaking kindly to them, then that's feedback, right? What's the difference between feedback and somebody just being mean? And so helping to parse through some of those things. But the generational issues that are showing up right now, I think happens over and over again, where you have people that just cling to what they know and feel is right and how they've managed, and then you have the next generational culture which pushes hard against that, and that's been going on for many generations. Obviously it's not a bad thing because it just keeps happening. It's a part of human nature. So maybe we could embrace it and not be so stressed about the change that's happening. And even if you don't understand it all, it doesn't mean that it's inherently bad. I think people are scared of change, and that's really normal. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the next generation is doing. I don't understand it. It's weird to see my 12-year-old wearing the clothes I was wearing at 12. Like it's a weird, like that sort of aspect of it is strange, but I think it's beautiful. And I remember my mom kind of always wishing me on myself, and I just said to her the other day, like, joke's on you, I love myself, like, and I love that my kid is like me, and I enjoy my home with her here. She doesn't really stress me out because we like each other, and I think that's kind of novel.
Well, Haley always gets the least annoying extra kid badge. So she's pretty easy to get along with, which is fantastic. But also that you can have these kind of conversations. I generally frame it as, are you here for solutions or sympathy? And often the answer is a little of both. So
right. It's really often the answer. And so if that's the answer for our kids, isn't that probably the answer for one another too? Like, where we can hold space and validate feelings for one another in our friendships and our partnerships, and also need to figure out if there's a path forward or what that path forward should look like, or remind people that they can make choices, that they're not trapped. And it we're culturally framed, if you're married, it we're encouraged to stay in those marriages. I don't think that we shouldn't be. I think that is important, but I also think that we need permission to be able to realize we can let things go, and that we then need to grieve those things, and we need time and space to grieve those things and be able to find a path forward through all of that, rather than just feeling like we have to keep doing the same thing over and over that isn't working. It's not to give up too soon, but it is to realize that sometimes we just grow and change, and we can let things go. And that could be a job, it could be your kids going off to school, it could, it really could be many things. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. We're supposed to change. That's a part of what happens to gain wisdom.
Thank God. Because I'd get really bored if we were the same.
Right?
This is an excellent segue, because adults, as you shared, like, why can't we take these lessons learned and apply them to adulthood? Which is, I think, exactly what Ruffled Feathers does. So let's take a look at your new website, which I'm so proud of you for launching, and let's talk about the brand itself, how you built this brand, the kind of services you're going to be offering, which I think is your tremendous differentiator, as the kind of topics that you have mastery in and are willing to take on, and how you approach your client work. Shall we?
Sure.
That sounds good. Would you like to present your website so that you can drive around, or would you like me to showcase it?
Either way.
I think you should drive. So let me tell you how to do it. Let me tell you how to do it. Anybody at home who is a live stream guest, this is how you do it. At the very bottom of there you go. Find our wonderful website here. Fabulous. At the very bottom of your screen, you should have a present button. And you can just present and share your screen, and give us a little walkthrough, and we'll bring it up. I can't wait to showcase this brand. How did you come up with it? I know you said earlier about how we ideated the name and came up with it, but what is about it that appealed to you? Because people really struggle with naming. It's one of the biggest hangups. Like, how do I come up with a name? Like, how do I know it's right? Is the URL going to be available? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I brainstormed for a long time on this, and I knew I wanted something that was catchy and clever. I wanted something that was going to capture the idea of being a little bit countercultural. I toyed with the idea of black sheep for a while, but because I do a lot of anti-racism work, I didn't really want anything that was suggestive, that could be interpreted in a way that might look through that lens. So I didn't want to do that. But then I realized that like one of the things that I've really learned to do over time is to ruffle feathers. And I'm not, the benefit of that is that ruffling feathers, as I say here on my website, is like we have this negative connotation of it to cause a disturbance or to arouse nervousness or annoyance or concern. But birds ruffle their feathers to assert dominance, regulate their body temperature, get rid of excess water so they can fly and they can stay alive. And so the concept of that really spoke to me, because we're not having these conversations just to make grandma uncomfortable. We're having these conversations because if it allows us space to grow and change and heal, and change dynamics that we didn't even think were possible to change, then why wouldn't we explore them? And why are we scared to do that? And I think that we're culturally scared. I don't necessarily know that we're all individually scared, but it just feels like, oh, well, I've never thought about that. I was talking to someone recently that was talking about how, they yell at their kids. And I was like, I don't. I've raised my voice at Haley a few times maybe in her life. And that is because I made a choice to want to communicate differently. And it's not making her soft. Now, granted, if she got yelled at by somebody, she would be upset about that. And I would also say, I wouldn't want to be yelled at by somebody. And that's not a way that I want to teach her to have boundaries. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with kind of ruffling some feathers a little bit. So a lot of this is just figuring out, what's caging ourselves in. One of my favorite things I had said to my now husband when I did get remarried is that he had an ADHD coach that told him he had to be up early every day, and like the early bird catches the worm. And I was like, there are enough worms. You do not have to be up early to go around to get a worm. It's just not necessary. There's plenty. We live in abundance, and we're just taught scarcity.
Why? And also to me, that's really in alignment with the pillar of white supremacy. That is, there's only one right way to do things.
Yes.
What is why am I celebrated for getting up at 5:30 in the morning every morning, but I go to bed by 9:30 at night, whereas a night owl, gets up at whatever time and is productive? What does it matter whether the sun is out or not out?
Yeah.
It's matters none. There are plenty of worms out there. We're going to hashtag that. There's plenty of worms.
Plenty of worms. That's right.
Yeah, indeed.
So part of my brand building was also, I was actually excited to land on Ruffled Feathers as a name, partly because I love puns. And part of that, I think, is it's silly and nerdy and it's joyful. It makes people like have a little moment of laughter, or like the groan that hides the laughter. And then I think that that's important. And this allowed me to really be able to play with that to some extent. And I have a lot of bird puns throughout my website.
I really wanted you to come on board today and showcase this brand for you did all of this stuff yourself now, granted, you are naturally creative, you have a great aesthetic, you've this isn't your first rodeo with a website, you kind of understood the importance of messaging, we did some positioning work, but other than that, you have not enlisted professional help from outside yourself at all. And I think there's a real, as Jody Whistling would say, ROI of DIY in this site. And I think it's a beacon of hope for people who are like, well, I'd love to start my own business or hang out my own shingle or start my own coaching practice, but I'm so overwhelmed by what it would take to kind of get launched. Mm-hmm. And I just celebrate that you did this, really all on your own. And it's remarkable to me how sticky and beautiful this is, and I celebrate that.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I really wanted an opportunity. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of writing and rewriting and identifying what you want people to know. And also I felt like because it's so, because it's me, because I'm marketing myself, and like I will and am partnering with people for a few different things throughout this, like for different workshops and stuff like that. But because this was a big part of what I wanted to do, a little bit it was about branding myself, which makes it very authentic and sort of easy. And then it also has a level of vulnerability that feels a little bit intimidating as well, because it's kind of like me being able to talk about, you know, these things. So I have some just topics of conversation that we can have here listed, and this isn't encompassing all of them by any means, but like I want to talk about neurodivergence, I want to talk about anti-racism work, ethical non-monogamy, psychedelics. That has a huge renaissance right now, and there's a lot of people curious about it.
Thank the baby Jesus.
And you know, communicating and non-punitive parenting, being in relationship with your kids, not in an authoritarian kind of way. Like when I think about having a boss, the best bosses I had were collaborative. They were not telling me what to do all the time. They were supportive and helping me with the overall goals. And I view parenting in the same way. Pleasure activism, I talked about that a little bit earlier, and wanting to center joy in the work. Decolonizing, healing from religion. I grew up Catholic. Anybody that really identifies with that, I'm really happy for them, and it's beautiful for them. For me, I had to walk away from that and still find my place spiritually, because I am a very spiritual person, and so that was a long journey. Thriving after divorce, like what does it mean to re-know yourself outside of being a wife or a partner or even a mom?
Do you have an answer? I'm asking, asking for a friend.
You know.
I don't know. I'm actually kind of like, how do I find meaning in my life if I'm not taking care of someone? It's quite a journey. Even if you know it intellectually, you still can. I was just staring into space last night. I had no kid here, no dog, no man, no nothing, and I'm just staring into space.
Why is that bad?
It feels unsettling, I guess.
Yeah, but that unsettled, I mean, you know, half of my brand is like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. That's where we change and grow.
Sure. I'd like to order 3 pizzas. Just kidding.
We can go offline about that.
I'm happy to be online with them. I'm just saying these are powerful, and the way that you've worded them from a copy perspective, like even when you go up to the one that's about anti-racism work, it's not anti-racism work, it's owning white fragility, which is such a whole different type of conversation. So the copy is beautiful.
That's one of those things that's really important. I think a lot of times, you know, with people are interested in doing anti-racism work, but they don't know where to start, or they've read books, but they don't really know how the action applies forward. And so much of that isn't just that it's not our fault that any of this happened. We were just born in the last, you know, 30, 40, 50 years. It's not our fault, but it's still our responsibility. Just like when you purchase a house, if you purchase an older house, you're not just like, well, I'm going to blame the people that lived here before for it, and I'm not going to fix anything. You're taking ownership, and you're fixing it, and you're making it yours to make it more beautiful and last longer and be a representation of yourself. And I think that's a lot of the work we need to do in anti-racism work.
I want to add something to that house analogy of buying a house, you know, your stewardship of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that really strikes me as such a powerful concept that you can apply, you know, culturally or in a macro perspective, is when people who have like a maximalist aesthetic, you know, and want to decorate their house in very permanent, you know, kind of ways, like bold paint and wallpaper on the ceiling and tremendous fixtures, etc. And the pushback they'll get is like, oh my God, well, you'll never be able to sell. You're gonna have a hard time selling this place. And so it squashes all of this expression. And that idea is, well, if I adhere to that, then I'm only renting this place from its future owner. I just want to put that bookend on your house analogy of like, oh, you know, you've got to take care of it. But also don't rent it from the future owners. Be yourself within that space.
Nurture it. And when the next person comes along and they take ownership of it, then they get to add their piece to it. But more than likely, they're going to keep something that you created in that space if you don't whitewash it yourself. No pun intended. We're talking about anti-racism work.
Keep those puns coming, baby. I'm so for it.
One of the things I did want to just mention, like on the website, is that because we focus in doing a lot of anti-racism work and decolonizing and anti-patriarchy kind of ideas, that I'd be remiss to ignore the fact that this is a business, it's not a nonprofit. And that's partly because just how the systems are set up, where you cannot really have a business model that is sort of based on nonprofit principles without a board and without a lot of other rules and applications, etc. So one of the things that we do here is I donate. I will, and as I grow, will continue to donate money towards the Piscataway tribe, which I currently work from the land that was owned by them. My home is on their land, and then also a organization that does money for decolonizing wealth. And no, it's not. Oh, I need to fix that. Liberated Capital is an organization that essentially provides money to people that have not had long-term wealth, and it allows for businesses and other people, other things that are owned by Black-owned businesses or movements to be funded. And that's because I want to make a living, but I can't ignore that I have privilege, and I don't want to appropriate the work or leadership that people of color have been putting into this work for generations, not just, a few years or a few months, in the same way that I'm getting this off the ground.
Wow. If that is appealing to folks, and I can't see how it wouldn't be, how could they get started working with you?
I have a lot of opportunities for work. So some of the things that I do classes and workshops. I do them in person or online, and there's lots of different topics. You can review my website to see if any of them sort of hit the mark for things that you're looking for. So that's available. And then I do coaching, both group and regular, online and in person. I do like to be with people. So if you're local, I enjoy that. I like to work with local businesses and nonprofits, especially when we're starting to talk about work-life balance or wanting to provide value outside of monetary value for your staff, like, being able to work through how to do that, or how your organization could run in less of a hierarchy and still be really functional and more joyful. I do psychedelic support. So I will help facilitate psychedelic experiences. I do not provide those products. I cannot do that. But if you have access to them, I'm there to help sort of prep and integrate, because a lot of that work is sort of like the work that we're talking about can sort of be done in a hyper-focused way. And if you go to my website, there's lots of studies that talk about that. It's not just me being like, yay, psychedelics. There's a lot of evidence and a lot of work out of Johns Hopkins and some other institutions that are showing the significant benefits of that. So I think it's really important to me as well. And then also, just as value adds, you can bring people into sessions. You can, if you need accountability as a person with ADHD, sometimes I just don't need a whole hour for somebody to talk to. I just need somebody to be like, hey, did you do that thing that you said you were going to do? Right. That I can provide some of those kinds of support, some mirroring in ADHD work. And that is all stuff that I really enjoy too. And it's really nice to be able to work professionally in something that you're passionate about.
What a wrap up, baby. How can people reach out to you?
You are welcome to come in through my website, or email me at info@ruffledfeathersinc.com. Just note the INC. That is, you were talking earlier about website names and etc. And so Inc. was included in mine in order for me to purchase it. And if you're interested in working with me and you want to try something just to see if it's a good fit for you, I'm also offering an opportunity to do a 60-minute coaching session, $75 on breaking through the cage, figuring out what you might need in order to just make that next step, and see if it's coming from a place of you holding yourself back, the culture holding you back, or just giving you permission to be excited about the future.
And that's a special offer to Stone Fruit Roll-Up listeners and audience. And how can people reach you about that? Through email? Just email you?
That's the best way.
Mm-hmm. And also maybe, thank you, Saturn, for putting that email address up there. Let's read it out loud for anyone who is not visually watching. info at ruffledfeathersinc.com, ruffledfeathersinc.com, and also connect with Nicole on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Saturn.
LinkedIn and Facebook, and shortly I'll be launching my TikTok. That's not quite off the ground yet, but be looking for me on lots of platforms with just asking questions and giving you permission to take a walk in the middle of your workday.
I love that. And if you folks have any questions that they want to put in the comments, we will absolutely answer those things. Nicole, look, we came to the end of an hour, girl. You didn't even think we could fill it. How did that feel? How did that feel to you?
I mean, being authentic to a brand about something that I've worked so hard and passionately about, it's nice to be able to talk about it for an hour, because most of the time you give a short spiel to someone and they're like, oh, okay. So this has been really nice to do a deep dive.
Hey, I want everyone to know about you and Ruffled Feathers, and to know that they can follow their own hearts and build a business brand out of whatever tickles them. They don't have to do it the way anybody else does it. So you're a living example of that, and you've been personally so important and valuable to me. I might have been lost in the ether emotionally about 1,000 times if you hadn't tethered me back in. So I thank you for that and contributing to my life, and I cannot wait to see how this business lifts you and brings you joy.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to keep talking about it, and thank you for all of your help in helping me frame out what was really important and get these ideas a little bit more cohesive, so I had a jumping off point.
Girl, let's go have cocktails.
That sounds delightful. What are you doing in an hour?
I am live streaming another live streaming show, and we're talking about TikTok, and I cannot wait. I've got my tabs all set up for show and tell. Perfect. I'm so excited.
I'll watch.
Yeah, please do, at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can check out my LinkedIn profile to see a link for this, or the YouTube channel at Stoned Fruit. It's also there. So next week Saturn's doing an intergalactic takeover.
Ooh.
And Saturn and Tony are going to talk about discovering communities on Discord. I think. Right, Saturn? Right. Okay. I'm not even going to be here. Maybe I'll be in the comments. It's an intergalactic takeover with Saturn G and Tony P, and that will be next week. And for our audiences here today, thank you so much for coming to the Roll-Up. This was such a special and personal moment for me, and it means a lot to me that you were here, Nicole. So we will see you Thursday in the comments. Yes, some of my friends want to come by and watch. Very excited. Very good. Cannot wait.